Well, I want to thank Lou and his entire team. I think I'm with Carol. I went to one of the first ones and there might have been 50 people. And I think you have 1,200 people either here or online. So 1,400. So I don't mean to underdo that. And I really want to thank Carol. In addition to the Home Care Association, she worked at PHI, the health department. It's just been a longtime friend and great partner. I have a lot of staff here, AAA's here, Association Director Becky Prevey. The MPA that Carol talked about is really about the what and the where, right? And it's been a tremendous amount of work for Carol and her team and for our team as well. And that's been led by John Cochran. So I want to thank him as well. Assemblyman Kim, who's been a fantastic friend and partner, Assemblyman McDonald, Senator Ashby have all been really incredible to our office and the network that we oversee. I get why today the focus is on Medicaid, nursing homes, hospital, Medicaid funded home care, MLTC changes, et cetera. That's a really important conversation to have. But we are, as was mentioned earlier, the non-Medicaid part of the continuum, which is critically important. I think we have about 160,000 nursing home beds in New York State. We have 4.8 million people over the age of 60 and another 3.7 million between 45 and 59. So half the state is over the age of 45. And depending on the numbers we're talking about, I've heard numbers of 2.2 million caregivers. Our data studies show 4.1 million anytime in a year are providing some type of uncompensated care to somebody else at an economic value of $39 billion. I think people often think of people who are caregivers as a supplement to the formal system. I think of it exactly the opposite. The formal system is the supplement to what friends, families, and neighbors do every single day. The speed of which I'm going to go through this is going to, probably brush your hair back. I want to make sure that Beth and Lou, don't kill me for going over time. But what Lou and his staff always do is post these PowerPoints, so you can do a deeper dive. But I want to kind of take a different tact here and go a little bit deeper into the why. So Carol, again, did a fantastic job walking through some of the budget changes, the master plan on aging. I'm going to take a little walk down memory lane and give you a bigger perspective. And I love that Carol went through the various things, not only in this budget for the health department, but last year. Older adults, families, and kids do not live in one agency. Older adults touch health, transportation, DMV, housing, and you can go on and on. NYSOFA, Parks and Rec, et cetera. So this needs to be an all hands on deck approach. And the way that I see aging is really out of two lenses: how we care for our current crop of older adults. And as a geriatric social worker, it's a priority of mine. But the other lens that I see aging out of is an economic development lens. And that's what I want to talk a little bit more about today. So, I'm not going to get into the details. Aging starts when you're born, and we have to recognize that. So the master plan on aging, while in the short term focused on older adults, this is really about across the age spectrum, because the families that you're born into, the opportunities you may or may not have, whether that be access to food, education, socialization, whatever, is going to have a huge impact on you in your middle ages. And then again, as you get older. So the strategy is a short-term strategy, a middle strategy, and a long-term strategy to develop communities that help people of all ages grow up and grow old successfully. So we got to understand that it's a lifelong process. It's tough to read this from over here, so I'm going to do my best. There are 3 generations of older adults now over the age of 60. So statutorily, we serve the over 60 population for most things. But you could have 3 generations to. So what I find always interesting, and Assemblyman Kim mentioned this, the ageism. We absolutely live in an ageist society. The isms are learned: sexism, racism, homophobia, which means they can be unlearned. And I think some of the things that I want to talk about today that we've been talking about for a decade really help to change heads and minds about what older people are. It's the only population that's painted with a broad brush. And I even hear in some of the earlier remarks talking about older people as them. If we're lucky enough to get there, this is going to matter to us as well. So I'm going to do a little level set here, because I love data and I love numbers, and numbers can speak way better than anecdotes can. And anecdotes are important, but data matters. So let's take a look at, and I know Dave was here, AARP did a great job in the 50+ longevity economy in showing the economic, social, and intellectual impact of older adults. Because I think when you value something, you treat it very, very differently than when you devalue something. Can you flip that back on? Thank you. So you can see 83% of all the household wealth is held by people over the age of 50. 1.8 trillion in federal, state, and local taxes. This is national data. They buy more goods and services than your younger counterparts. And I want to put a caveat out. I am not suggesting at all pitting older adults against younger adults, but people don't think of older people in this regard, right? Things are marketed to younger people. We think that older adults take, they don't give, they're expensive, they have nothing to offer. Couldn't be further from the truth. They're the number one volunteer bloc in the nation. Number one givers to philanthropy and charity. They're the number one entrepreneur group starting new businesses. And when you start a new business, 76% of them are successful after 2+ years versus younger individuals starting a business have about a 25% success rate. And they're a huge tourism bloc. So if you're like me and you go to the Adirondacks or the Catskills, who's riding their Harleys? Who's at the parks? Who's in tents? Who's doing the shopping, et cetera? Again, it's not one or the other. It's just open your eyes and look around and see, and you know, because you see the same things that I do. So again, support almost 90 million jobs. Now here's what New York looks like, right? 50+, 36% of the population. Why is 50 important? Because in addition to the 60+ that we're supposed to serve, big block of your people providing uncompensated care are 50 and older. So they're part of this puzzle. Contributed 43% of our state's GDP, support 6 million jobs, 482 billion in wages and salary, and contributes 72 billion. But look at the percentages of state and local taxes. We would not have a local, regional, state, or national economy without our older population. This is data we pulled together. 80% of the state's retirement system gets paid out in New York State, 10.6 billion. 47 billion in Social Security, recession-proof funds coming to communities every single year. We have 1 million volunteers providing 500 million hours of service at an economic value of $13.8 billion. Your not-for-profits, not just the Aging Network, hospitals, poll workers, mentor programs, working in schools, historical societies, YMCA, and I could go on and on and on. We would not have a robust not-for-profit sector without older adults, and then we know the caregiver. So that's just a little snapshot of what aging really is. Not what we've been taught to believe over the last 200 years, although none of us are 200 years old, but that's the culture that we have grown up in. So when you talk about what makes up good health, and Carol's chart on the master plan, this is an all hands on deck approach, because if we can improve, and that's why the Governor Hochul has really taken this next step forward. And if you look at the budget outside of just aging and health, there are huge investments, $25 billion 5-year housing plan. We just started a rural transportation interagency task force 2 weeks ago, because we know how important transportation is. Social participation. If you are socially isolated and lonely, you have an increased risk of dementia, depression, suicide. It's the equivalent of smoking a pack of cigarettes a day and cost Medicare $7 billion a year to treat. So this is what we're trying to get at, is if you understand that 10% of all healthcare costs are from your healthcare diagnosis, another 30% are from genetics, 60% are your personal choices and behaviors in your built environment, which is why we need to include all of these organizations and agencies, state level, local level, and all of their the folks that they work with, because that's how we're going to get to a healthier state, a state that builds the robust community infrastructure, because we have a reactive system. We wait for people to get extraordinarily sick, and then they get served in the most expensive environment, rather than focusing on prevention, which is 5% of our nation's spending is on prevention. So again, you'll have these. These are the types of services that we provide. I think one of the great things here is how diverse this group is. And we need to know what everybody else is doing so that we can serve people not siloed, but holistically. We need to know, and you guys need to know, for example, I'll give you a couple of examples. 63% of the state's veterans are over the age of 60. We have 24,000 veterans on our caseload. We have 12,500 individuals with a diagnosed mental health illness. We serve 8,500 individuals that have alcohol and substance abuse. And I could go on and on. I'm just illustrating that, all these different agencies, whether they know it or not, and a lot of them do, serve older adults. Office of Children and Family Services has adult protective services and the kinship and grandparent programs. We have 350,000 grandparents taking care of grandkids. So we all got to work together, and we're doing that. These are the things that we assess for. How valuable would this be if you work in healthcare, knowing that we have this information if somebody winds up in the emergency room or hospitalized or is in rehab and then winds up coming back to the community? We were structured at exactly the same time Medicare and Medicaid in 1965 for two really important purposes: to prevent hospitalizations, ER visits, and nursing home placements. But equally as important, when you wind up in an acute care setting or a long-term care setting and you're coming back to the community, the only way you can succeed is through community-based resources, which is the heavy lift, because it's not acute care. Acute is episodic, short-term. The game is in the community. I'm just going to go through again because a lot of folks don't know this. This is not our first rodeo in talking about smart growth, livable communities, age-friendly communities. So again, we started this in I can't even read that, but I remember 2006. Model zoning and planning guidelines we developed with the Department of State. Worked with Division of Homes and Community Renewal on addressing barriers that overcome livable communities. We put out community empowerment grants so that communities could start to develop communities that again abide by livable, age-friendly principles. Why do I say livable? Because age-friendly hadn't even existed at that time. We were so ahead of the curve. We had over 300 people at 2 locations, federal, state, local, and a ton of stakeholders representing aging, disabilities, and families at a community empowerment conferences. We developed a 150-page guide with 150 different areas called Livable New York Resource Manual that looks at zoning, housing, design, transportation by the best thinkers in New York State and the best thinkers across the country. That's the link. You should check it out. It's unbelievably comprehensive and addresses, again, many of the things we're talking about in the MPA and age-friendly. What's the point? Don't recreate the wheel. You build on what you've already done. You pull in the things you already know. You develop a baseline to let the public and other agencies and county governments and municipals see what the plan is, what's already in action, and where we need to go, so that when you engage the public, what you get back is informed. Where are the gaps? What do we need to do here? Is there a difference, obviously, in geography? Of course there is, but those types of things. As Carol mentioned, we became the first age-friendly state in 2017. There's 32 communities that formally signed on to AARP's process, but there's many, many more that believe in the concepts and have built it into what they're doing. We put out grants to encourage counties to sign on to be age-friendly. We created 5 age-friendly technical assistance centers, regional centers of excellence. We wanted counties to replicate the previous administration's Executive Order 190, which builds livable principles, smart growth into how state government works and procurement, and to do that at the community level. Why? So that there's a top-down, bottom-up approach and we're all rowing in the same direction. Complete streets, the downtown revitalization, we built language into these grants. You guys know over $600 million have been put out, and you get extra points in your application. New York Forward is the smaller version of DRI, which targets suburban areas and more rural areas. Okay, so I'm just going to keep going here because I am going fast. There are a lot of things that we have been doing. And again, I want to just shout out to Becky Preview, who's been an amazing partner at the association. What does the association do? Represents our 59 county offices for the aging and their 1,200 community-based partners all across the state. We've been embedding technology, combating social isolation, but the beauty of this is that we're measuring these things to show their efficacy. Our award-winning animatronic pet project, as of this month, we will have 21,000 pets out to isolated older adults all over the state. 75% reduction in depression, pain, and isolation. Get set up. We offer for free for anybody over the age of 50 to not only learn how to use their technology, but to take classes that will help them engage in all kinds of areas. Interestingly enough, top 10 classes taken are all health and wellness classes: exercise, hydration, nutrition, Tai Chi, etc. T-Care is an evidence-based caregiver pilot that we're working on to prevent burnout, which is one of the major reasons why people enter a nursing home. Go Grandparents, specialized rideshare service that teaches the drivers the unique needs of older adults. Door-through-door service, mild cognitive impairment, et cetera. We're piloting that in 3 different counties. Am I doing good on time, Lou? Okay, sweet. Again, I apologize about the speed here. Archangels in Travolta, 2 more pieces of our caregiver. Travolta is an evidence-based caregiver support app that connects you with all of the resources we have in New York State. It's free for anybody of any age in New York State. Archangels developed what's called the Caregiver Intensity Index, takes less than 2 minutes, and is part of our Any Care Counts campaign in New York to see where you are in your caregiving journey, which changes all the time. Green, yellow, red, and then how we can get you down off some of those cliffs. We've brought a virtual senior center model out of New York City to 19 counties in upstate New York. We're working with Intuition Robotics on this, the only active and proactive artificial intelligence that actually engages the older adult. It was designed by 75-year-olds for 75-year-olds and above who are not good with technology. It's been amazing. I have one I'm piloting in my house. Wonderful sense of humor. And just does a ton of things, but we're, again, measuring that in 4 different areas, and it's empathetic. Pets Together is a national organization that uses the power of live therapeutic pets to combat isolation and loneliness. And then we're working on a bunch of other things, and that's just a snapshot, not to mention the promising things that we are working with others on. iGuard actually shuts your stove off if you leave it for 5 minutes to prevent fires. It's prevented 660,000 fires in the homes of 5,500 houses. And I checked this out yesterday when I picked up my daughter from SUNY Cortland. What I found out, and this won't be a surprise to you with teenage kids, or if you remember your years at college, right? It might be late at night on a Friday. You might have gone out. You go to the central kitchen. You're not paying attention because of maybe what you did while you went out, right? What they found is they were getting 5 to 7 911 calls to the fire department throughout the SUNY system every single weekend. They installed iGuard 3 years ago, and the SUNY system have not had 1 call in 3 years. So there's a bunch of these different things that we are working on, and please, I hope you come afterwards. But here is what I'm really excited about. Not to mention I wasn't excited about anything else that I just talked about, but we did the first ever needs assessment survey in New York State that just concluded. And I'm not going to go through all the details. I really want you to take a look at this. This is only phase 1, meaning what I'm going to show you is 30,000 feet. We're going to be able to deep dive into every county based on all of the features that you're going to see what the answers are. We have data from every single county in New York State. Almost 27,000 responses. So when you hear a poll on the news about whatever it is, products, politics, or whatever, your sample size is about 500 people. We have 27,000 responses from every county. And here's the way that we organized it. Now, I want to point out one thing here. To see that 45% of men fill this out is huge, because I mean that. Because again, I've been doing this work for 31 years. It's, women that are going to the centers, using our services primarily. I'm not saying men don't, but it's like a 75-25. And to see that we had almost a split of men and women is really, really important. We hit every income range. In fact, most of the answers, almost 50%, have incomes of less than $50,000. Look at the expectation of the retirement age. I raised that because we talked about, or the panel did this morning, workers. Older workers are the solution, or a major solution to the workforce issues. They're not looking to retire. If you retire at your traditional age, 65, you will spend more years in retirement than you did working. People get bored, they get lonely, they get isolated because we attribute our self-worth and our relationships to where we work. It's not complicated. So we have a huge opportunity here, again, to combat ageism and take the data that we know about the value of older workers and put it into play. So we organize this by housing status. And I know my buddy Frank Mealy is coming up next. One of the things I'm not sure I put in the slides or not is 72% of older adults that own their homes own them without any mortgage whatsoever, sitting on trillions of dollars of home equity. And if you look at some of the costs of the homes and are they having trouble paying for their homes, et cetera, this is a huge opportunity that I don't think that we think about in terms of having your home help you stay in your home as a potential tool and option. So I'm just going to throw that out as well. So we have this by community. Was it a good place to live? Do you think your community is a good place to live? You can see all of these different areas that we're going to really be able to do a deep dive on. And I know I'm running out of time, so I'm just going to go through these and you can do a deeper dive yourself, because there's some things that really stick out here that are important. What you think about your community, the perception of whether you're valued in your community. I'm sorry, I'm having trouble seeing this, that's all. Overall quality of life, et cetera. Ease of travel. Again, we know that if you, over 1 million older adults lose their opportunity to drive every single year. The governor spent a lot of time talking about mixed use, age integrated, transit oriented development, because the way that suburbia was developed actually started in Melville, Long Island after World War II, where you put housing over here and everything else over there. And if you can't drive, you are isolated. And 95% of the geography in New York State has no public transportation, and public transportation assumes you can physically use it, you can afford it, and you know how to use it. So there's got to be more than one solution to transportation than public. Employment and work. Again, are there opportunities for building skills? People are saying no. We have solutions to that. Get set up. One of the other things that they've developed that we're working with them on is they've developed 47 training and skills development courses for older people. So that could be for people who are still working that want to update their skills, people that retired and are like, I want to go back to work because I'm bored, or people that have to go back to work because of their economic situation. Affordability of housing. Again, governor has a very strong and ambitious agenda around housing. Housing is one of the 8 domains of Age Friendly. I know Frank is coming up here and we kind of look at some of these things together. Engagement and recreation. I find this fascinating. Feel like there's not a lot of opportunities in your community. Folks feel like if they had those opportunities, then they would take them up. But later on here, what you're going to see is, are you involved in a civic group? Are you involved in volunteering? 80% of these survey respondents said no. So there's a disconnect there. Why not? Their daily activities. Again, this is for all of us in the caring community. This is our bread and butter. You take like ACS self-reported data and you got 900,000 people that are self-reporting. They have some type of limitation, but those limitations don't mean nursing home placement. We can help an 83-year-old low-income female with 4 to 10 chronic conditions, 2 ADL limitations and 6 IADL limitations live in their homes and communities for 5 to 7 years with a comprehensive array of services and connections to others for under $10,000 a year. Resource availability, are resources available? Are they easy to access? Do people advertise them? It talks about that. Services and care, you're getting the care you need, maintaining a healthy diet, access to vision care, oral care, all important stuff. Your mental wellness. I think the first one is pretty interesting. 34% are at the beginning. And we work a lot with the health department, Alzheimer's disease, Alzheimer's chapters, where I learned that 71 medical conditions can mirror or mimic early onset dementia, as well as prescription drug interactions. So what we can't do as a society is put our head in the sand if we're starting to experience those things and hope that they go away. That's a big mistake. You can pick things off the list and then maybe get to a point where, okay, you might have early onset dementia, and then there are things that we can do to slow the growth. Personal safety, again, big focus in the governor's budget. Community and social, this is what I'm talking about. Community social engagement, finding productive and meaningful activities, People are saying it's not a problem, but then are they doing it? 80% no. Only half participating in religious and spiritual activities. That's fascinating because that population is much more faith-oriented than younger individuals. So I know this is going to be posted. We're going to have a lot more here, but this is really amazing data that I think is going to help influence the MPA. Our 4-year plan to the feds is due August 1st, so it's going to be part of that. But again, I think that when you go back to some of the earlier sentiments, when you listen to what Carol talked about, integrated care models, and I know you're going to hear one later that we've partnered with Lou and Everhome on a panel later. Integrated care models are the only way to go. Social determinants of health is a good word. Go back to the services we provide. That's what we've been doing for 50 years. And so have CAP agencies, faith-based organizations, town and municipal governments. All of those entities have to join with the clinical care community and technology so that we are talking more about quantity of life and more about quality of life. Thank you.
If everybody in state government in this game had the energy that Greg Olsen brings, we would have the problem solved in a week. So thank you, Greg. Stay there. And Carol, I want to ask a question. We've heard from the New York State legislators, the New York State budget at $229 billion. We've heard from the executive branch on the master plan on aging and some of the innovations and the new programs that are coming. But New York State is one of 50 states. And the federal government used to be in the long-term care and the home care game before they balanced the budget in 1997. Now we have Senator Gillibrand, who has her own 5-point master plan on aging. And if I can quote from her press release, we must safeguard the right to age in place and enable older Americans and people with disabilities or mobility challenges to remain in their homes, stay active in their communities, and lead independent lives. The overwhelming preference of older adults is to age in place in their own homes, and caregiver support is critical to being able to age in place. And Carol, you started this conversation by saying we need dual eligible programs. We need Medicare and Medicaid and the whole person to be served by the system. What initiatives is New York State, and I know, Greg, you work with Senator Gillibrand very closely, what initiatives in Washington and New York and in other states are being done to bring this comprehensive value-based, quality of life-based program to reality? Either one could jump on that.
Well, I think this will be a shared answer. First of all, the State Office for the Aging and the Department of Health are working closely with Senator Gillibrand to make this a reality. Second of all, I'll just tell you, New York is one of 50 states, right? Yes. Mm-hmm. Many other states do not have the same policies, do not have the same structure. In fact, they don't have certificate of need. And what has happened in a lot of these states is they have created numerous agencies to the point that, for example, in Los Angeles, there's one building that has 7 separate hospices in it. We have 41 hospices in the state of New York. It is the excess growth in a lot of these states that has caused the federal government to be concerned about fraud in Medicare, in hospice, and in home health. It's not New York, it's other states. So we have to carry a message forward that we are doing things differently. You just saw a very comprehensive presentation on the non-Medicaid side of what we are trying to do in this state. I presented some of the other Medicaid side, if you will, of the equation. Together, we all have to get to our legislators and talk to them about the question you just asked, that we need a comprehensive approach. It is time to put some money into home and community-based services, all right? And it's time to revisit the regulatory structure. Medicare does not pay for telehealth visits for home care, by the way. They're happy for home care agencies to do it, but it's additive. They won't pay for it. All right. So there's all kinds of federal policies that need to be updated. So our work cannot be in New York State alone. It has to be at the national level.
Yep. So I'm gonna go this way a little bit, and you're right. So the first thing is we developed a Older Americans Act modernization proposal. The OAA is kind of our mothership, like CMS is to Medicare and Medicaid, looking for flexibilities, upgrading into, hopefully the 2020 to 2050 range, and financing the services. The least amount of money we get is from the feds, but they continue to provide more things that we should be doing. Now, what they're saying we should be doing is exactly right, but you got to fund those things. It's been state government and county government has picked those things up, and it's been great that the governor and Senator Gillibrand have embraced our plan, and Becky and I have organized the state units on aging and the other AAAs around the country around our plan, and then she added the master plan. So that's number one. Everybody knew the value of this network during the pandemic, and we lost an opportunity to seize on that and make some changes in funding priorities at that time. And now we move into the next big thing, right? Like we always do. You got all the things happening at the national level. You've got the debt ceiling. You've got immigration with Title 42. So now that's in the rearview mirror. We need a real system. You first start with, and Carol talked about private pay. We are the only state and first state in the country that developed a private pay model. It was supposed to go into effect at the beginning of the pandemic, and obviously it didn't because of the pandemic, but we need to reevaluate that. People need to have access to things where people aren't selling something. You need access to objective information, choices, and then you make the choice. So that's number one for individuals that can pay. Why we had to do that is because people like me and like you were actually barred from paying our network to provide services on behalf of your parents. And the way that we structured this is you can only private pay after you've exhausted federal, state, and local resources. That's it. And it just gives people the option to do that. Secondly, there are a variety of older adults that don't have resources, and we either partially or fully subsidize those things. But where you move through the system should be based on your care plan. And because culturally we are a crisis-driven system, meaning we don't ask for help, we think we can do it, and a lot of times we can until we get to a point that we can't, then we wind up in the health department's oversight system, which is extraordinarily expensive, and it's hard to go back once you're there. So we need to create a real system that has some steps that focuses in on the front end so that you're relieving pressure on the back end.
Thank you, Greg and Carol. Nice round of applause for our speakers from the executive branch.